help me finish out the message. So I asked her to do that with me today. I love that she said she prayed for the babies all the way up to older people. So she included Marty Toth, the older, right, Marty? Aren't you glad that she included you in that? Yeah. So we've been in this series on love, and we're talking about 1 Corinthians 13, which we're all very, very familiar with, right? 1 Corinthians 13, called the love chapter, and it's mostly at weddings. How many have ever read at a wedding? All of us, right? At a wedding, or in a greeting card, right? For a loved one, or maybe on Mother's Day, we tend to see that. Well, it wasn't written initially for that. It's kind of actually in a kind of a poem form in the Greek, and it wasn't written for those sorts of reasons. The romantic love that we use it for, right? That's not why it was written. It was written. Wasn't written in a vacuum either. So it was written for a reason. It was written, and I'll just recap a little bit. I know I've done it every week, but it's important to remember this. It was written to a church that Paul had started, pastored for a while, and then he was kind of a church planner, missionary, and left some other people in charge. And so he heard that they're kind of dysfunctional. They're not living the way that he really desires them to be a follower of Christ, to live like Jesus. And so remember, Corinth was this up and coming town, like a boom town. Michelle and I used to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I remember back then how Charlotte was just growing. And we go down to Sarasota. Sarasota, I think, is the number one, if I'm not mistaken, the number one fastest growing county in the United States. I think it was, at least, well, at one time it was, but Charlotte was the same way. So I talked to a friend of mine down there who still lives down there. He said, it's still just growing like crazy. Where we used to live, Charlotte is annexing all these little towns around and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It just keeps spreading out. Well, Corinth was like that. Corinth was this town where if you wanted to succeed, or you wanted to, make money, or you wanted to be in the thick of things, you went to Corinth. It's interesting to me that for some reason we tend to think cities are like that. In Africa, people leave the village and they go to the city trying to make it, right? And what happens is they end up living on the streets. They had it better off in the village, right? But so we tend to gravitate. We want that, want that success and so forth. And so the trouble with the town, and the church is just a subset of all the people there, is the people in Corinth. The negative side of the people in the church in Corinth is and you can read this through the text, they started to be divided. They started to bicker amongst themselves, right? They started to get argumentative. And now there were some positive things about it too. They were very, very charismatic. They were zealous even about their faith. And we see this because of how Paul talks to them through this text. Like 1 Corinthians 13:2, it says this. It says, talking about they have prophetic powers, they understand knowledge. And it says, even if you have the faith to move mountains, right? Saying all these things about them, which were true about them. Right, they were very, very smart people. I mean, they were in the know, and they were very successful. And so he says that to them. But he says, if you don't have love, he said, you're nothing. We listen to that and we hear that and we think, okay, that's fine. And but I hope that when I unpack this a little bit, you'll see it a little bit clearer, right? That they were. Let me put it this way. Let me ask you, how many of you think you're a super Christian? Probably not. I don't know. These guys, they were super Christians. Like they had it all going on. But Paul looked at these super Christians and said, yeah, but see, the trouble is you lack the most important thing. You lack love. Like all the things that society says are these great things and they admire. Great, you have all those things. But you don't have love. and it's nothing. And so he goes on to say things like this. Of course, we went over. It says, love does not envy, it does not boast, it's not proud. And the reason why he's saying these things, because that's exactly what they were. It's not rude, and they were rude. It's not self-seeking. That's all they did was look out for themselves, what was best for them. It's not easily angered. Boy, the bickering in the church then was it was absolutely terrible. And then it says it keeps no records of wrong. So you all know my favorite TV show is, of course, Seinfeld. And there's an episode there where Elaine meets this other group of guys, and Jerry calls them the Bizarro World, right? They're the exact opposite of George, of Jerry, and of Kramer. Three guys, but just the exact opposite, right? And that's kind of what's going on here. You know, Paul's talking about how we should be as followers of Christ. And then he's saying, but you Corinthians are living kind of in the bizarro world, right? All the things that you should be doing, you're the exact opposite. All you do is think about yourself, right? You're just navel gazers. Your favorite word in a sentence is I or me. And you're suspicious and you're jealous and you take offense at the slightest little thing. Aren't you glad that none of us are like that we do any of these things? I mean, we're so mature, right? They can't take even constructive criticism, right? They're doing everything they can just to get themselves ahead. And they're not grateful. Do you follow me? So that's nothing like what Paul is saying that a follower of Christ should be like. It's the bizarro world. And so, unfortunately, I think it's not too much different in our world today. I really do. Now, I personally think we have a great church. I think Freedom Life Center is a fantastic church. I watch the love that's poured out to people. I watched it to me when I would come home from the hospital, and the care and the concern and other people. And I think we have a great church. But we got to be careful that we don't we don't fall into negative ways and negative patterns. And so what I'd like to do is, before we get into some more practical application, I just kind of want to unpack the text a little bit, because here's why. I don't know about you, but so if you're a Bible reader, like reading your Bible, there's times when I'm reading a certain thing or whatever, and I'll get to there and I go, I'm super familiar with it. So I just kind of don't even read every word. I just kind of skim over it, right? I just kind of read over it because I know that, right? Anybody else do that? Right? I just kind of, yeah, I get it. And we don't stop to pay attention to really kind of what's going on, you know? And so I want to go through this and kind of just unpack this text a little bit for us, right? So it starts out like this. It starts out, love never fails. How many have heard that before? You heard that before? Love never fails. Yeah, I get it. It doesn't fail. Well, what exactly does that mean? Because it was written to a certain people, right? And fails to us kind of means, you know, success and failure, right? It kind of means that. But actually, in the Greek, I want to clarify this a little bit. It means like I don't know how to describe it. I was trying to think of something in my garden, but I think of like a flower, right? You ever take a flower home, like a rose? You guys ever buy flowers for your wife or girlfriend? And after a while, what happens to that rose sitting there? Even though it's in water, it tends to wilt and just kind of die, and the petals fall off, right? You get what I'm saying? That's the fails it's talking about here. That's the fails, not like not succeeding. You get what I'm saying? So sometimes we can read it in English and we can go, well, love never fails. Well, I don't know. You mean it always succeeds. In other words, if I love somebody, they're always going to love me back. That's not what this means. But unless you get some context, you could think that way and think, well, I've loved before and people didn't love me back, and that's not what this means. This is talking about it doesn't fail. It's going to last. It's never going to wilt. It's never going to go away. Do you follow me? That's love. That's what Paul's saying about love. And so this is the only thing he talks about that's not going to fail, right? And then he goes on to say, begins to talk about things that the Corinthians were, not even that they felt were important, but they were good at. So just think about yourself for a minute, or think about churches you've been in or whatever. Are there things that, I've been to churches where, and listen, I'm not going to get into theology here and try to explain these things to us, but different churches believe different things about what I'm about to read to you, right? And that's okay, because some, let me just read it. It says, but where there are prophecies, they will cease, and where there are tongues, they will be still. Now, if he's talking about some sort of spiritual gift, some sort of somebody that has some sort of prophetic ministry, meanings. The thing about prophecies in the Bible, the prophecies were always like, you didn't want to hear prophecies in the Bible because they were talking about things to come that weren't good, right? And so whether they were that sort of things or tongues, there are churches that this is a spiritual gift and they speak in a way that maybe you don't understand it, and there's an interpretation. I've been in churches like that, and I'm not putting those down. I'm just saying there's different ideas, or a better translation, to be honest, should be languages, not tongues, because tongues make it sound like something different. But you could ask somebody what's your, like within Wycliffe, we had a term. We would say, what's your mother tongue? What's your mother tongue? That meant what's the language that your mother taught you, that she spoke, that you spoke, the first thing that she spoke to you when you were born, your mother tongue. And so, or they could say your mother language. Okay, so here's the thing. This church in Corinth was really, really good at things like this. Now, whether they were supernatural, or whether they were just like this other way that I'm talking about, whatever they were very kind of proudful and boasting about it. And it said this, it said, like, the thing about those things is, Paul was trying to get to them and saying, as good as they are, those things will eventually fail. Those things will eventually go away. Those things will eventually wither. And then he says something like this, which is kind of strange to me, at least it is when I think about it. It says, where there is knowledge, it will pass. Where there is knowledge, does that confuse you a little bit? It does me, to be honest with you. Where there is knowledge, how's knowledge going to... Well, he goes on to explain. He goes on to say this. He says, for now we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes... Now, there's some different beliefs on that too. When completeness comes, it said that what is just in part will disappear. That's another way of saying, so this is what I believe. Now, you might believe differently. There are certain denominations that believe when completeness comes that it's the Bible. But the trouble with that is we still just know in part. We're still not there. So what I think it means is, personally, and I'm not saying you have to believe what I believe, but when that which is perfect comes, I believe when in the Bible it talks about there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, right? The Bible talks about there's going to be, I love the language, especially in Revelation, there's going to be a renewal of all things. A renewal of all things. When finally, now there's a separation. Don't think of it in terms of necessarily place, right? But there's a separation between heavenly realms and earthly realms. There's a separation. But he said there's come a day when heaven and earth are going to come together. They're going to be one. When that which is perfect comes. It says all these things then are going to pass away. And then he goes on to say it like this. He goes on to say, the further explanation, he says, when I was a child, he goes, well, let me just pause here for a minute. Let me just go back here for a minute about this knowing in part and prophesying, all this kind of stuff. And this is, and knowledge that we only know in part. Okay, let me tell you why this is important, especially for me as a Bible teacher. For you, I want you to know this. And any Bible teacher, we only know in part. Do you follow me? I only know in part. I am not conveying to you all truth and all knowledge, but that doesn't mean that what I'm saying is wrong. It's just I don't have all knowledge. It's kind of like when you were young and you learned, let's say you're in, I don't know, when you start learning math, addition, subtraction. What is that? What grade is that? What grade? First, second grade. You learn 2 + 2 = 4, right? 2 + 2 = 4. Now, if you were to take that first or second grader and say, with Einstein, E = mc², well, they wouldn't know that, right? That doesn't mean that 2 + 2 = 4 is wrong, just because you follow me? We know in part. We don't know fully. So it doesn't mean the things that we read and we discern from the Bible and we teach, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It just means that we just only know a small part. And so we may have knowledge, but we don't have full knowledge. We only know in part. He goes on to explain further. So when I was a child, I talked like a child. He goes, I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. So here's what I want you to know. When it comes to spirituality, in terms of knowing God and understanding everything, we're just children. We're just children. But that's okay. And what he's saying is, but there's going to come a day when you're going to mature, right? That time when completeness comes, when Christ comes again and there's a new heaven and a new earth and all things are made new. And then we're going to know in full. We're going to understand. So like we're children now, but one day we're going to grow up. And then he uses another line, which is, I'll have a picture here in a minute. It says this: now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, but then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, even as I am known fully. I'm fully known. Now, here's the thing about this. How many of you have a mirror in your bathroom? You have a mirror in your bathroom. When you look at it and you see a reflection, you see a perfect reflection, don't you? And so when we read this, we think, well, that doesn't make sense to me. But let me show you a picture of, this is a mirror from first century Rome. And what it is, it's made of like kind of different things, but bronze or copper. And they found these are actual mirrors that were found in Rome. And they had some that had handles on them, like that wooden handles. They had others that were more elaborate, that were bigger, that would be in a house or whatever. Now, these are all tarnished and everything. But what they would do is they would take these and they would polish them to where you could see like a reflection, right? It's like what would be a good example of that today? Maybe like a silver spoon or whatever, polished real well. You can look at it and you can kind of see a reflection, or like I don't know, like a bumper on a car, or a chrome bumper on a car. You can kind of see a reflection, right? And so when Paul penned this, they knew exactly what he was talking about. That we see ourselves like a reflection in a mirror. Well, I kind of see it. Do you follow me? But it's not clear. Like I could make it out, but really I couldn't tell if I had to tell what color, if someone else was facing, or couldn't tell what color eyes they had, or I couldn't distinguish the features exactly right. That's what Paul was saying here, right? That we only know partially now. And so it's like looking in a mirror. And so the Corinthians knew exactly what he meant. It doesn't mean, just like the math analogy, it doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong. It's just that it's not complete. And so I want you to understand that for us today. It's not all the great things that we think we might do or participate in or know or study or whatever. It's not complete. It's not complete. So there's no reason for us to get all puffed up and boastful about these kind of things, right? Because even as good as they are, even in part, he said, without love, they are nothing. They are nothing. And so, and then, I don't know if you guys remember, I can't remember it exactly, but it was I don't know if it was some story about, maybe it was in a children's book or whatever, about an elephant and about blind mice. And how if a blind mice came across an elephant and it was on its tail, would feel the tail and say, what are you feeling? And try to explain. They're blind, couldn't see the elephant. And explain, well, it's hard. You ever seen an elephant's tail? Maybe feel one elephant's tail. It feels like almost like plastic or whatever, or if another mouse was feeling the trunk. And that's what the Bible is getting at, right? Is we right now, friends, we don't see the whole picture, do we? We don't see the whole picture. Okay, so let me just kind of tie that into things we're talking about, Tim, with Clyde. We just don't see the whole picture. We know what we want. We know what we desire, but somehow we just don't see. We can't see everything. Now, again, I'm not one who believes that God is controlling everything, that we're just these marionette puppets, and He's, this is His will. I think we live in a world that God has created, but is in a state of imperfection, right? I mean, no, you are imperfect. I am imperfect. I was born with a bicuspid aortic valve, imperfection. I was born with that. Right? Why? Well, because I don't live in a perfect world. And these things happen. I don't understand it, why I was born like that. I don't understand why Clyde has to go through what he has to go through. I don't get it. Right? But God is God. That doesn't mean that He's not loving, that He's not there, that He's not good. You follow me? And I get it, that's a hard thing for us to fully grasp, to fully understand. But he said there's come a time when we will see in full. And you'll have the answers to all your questions. Why do babies get sick? Why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? Did you ever ask yourself that? Of course you did. And you'll have the answers to those things, right? Explain the Trinity to me. I don't get the Trinity. You'll have the answers to that. And maybe in that time, maybe those things won't even matter, right? But we'll have those answers. And then it says this, I love this, that we'll know like we are fully known. Let me just tell you this. Everybody pay attention to me. This is important. I want you to know something. You are two things to God. You are fully known and you are fully loved. Let that sink in for a minute. Does anybody else in this world know you fully? Does your spouse know you fully? No. Because we keep things from each other, don't we? I think, because we all think. I'll tell you what I think, and I think that you think the same thing. If you fully knew me, you might not love me. If you fully knew me, if you knew what I was maybe capable of, if you knew the thoughts that I had sometimes, if you knew those kind of things, you might not love me. Right? Anybody? But the truth about God is this. You are fully known. There's no secrets. None. Zero. Something about you that you have never spoken out loud. It's okay. God knows it. He says you're fully known and you're fully loved. Would you say that with me? I am fully known and I am fully loved. Say it again. I am fully known and I'm fully loved. Friends, that's the truth. That's a hard thing to comprehend, that we're fully known and we're fully loved. Then Paul goes on to say this. And now these three remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. The thing about these three things, I know you've heard this before, these are three things that no one can ever take away from you. No matter what they do, they cannot take away faith, hope, and love. Now, I think about this for a minute. I think about faith, hope, and love. They're the greatest. We talked about the renewal of all things when heaven and earth are come together, right? I think about faith. We have to have faith now because why? Because of all the things he just said. We don't see things fully right now, do we? We don't understand, do we, Tim? We don't understand about Clyde. So you know what? We got to live by faith. We have to have faith. We don't understand these things. But when that which is perfect has come, when heaven and earth come together, guess what? We're gonna know everything. We're not going to need faith, are we? Or hope. We have to have hope now because we can't see down the road 5 years for Clyde. We can't see it. Wish we could. So right now we have to have hope. We have to have hope. But one day, guess what? We're going to be down the hill, over the road, and we're going to know. But love will never cease. It will never end. Here's the thing. I think this. I hope I'm not. I hope you don't think I'm overstating it, because I don't think I can overstate it. When I said that love is the answer, what's the question? Michelle, why don't you come on up here now? I think love is our link to eternity. That's our link. It's love. Because we can't understand eternity. We can't understand what it's going to be like or what it is or any of that kind of stuff. But love being the thing that is eternal, that always lasts and never fails, that's our link. And so that's our link right here, right now, to eternity. That's our link to God. The Bible says that God is love. So I have a couple things I want to talk about real quick. Michelle's going to come up here. Let me just talk about this one first. Love is what fulfills. Let me just read this to you. This is really interesting, okay? This guy, Arthur C. Brooks, he is at Harvard Business School. He teaches the most attended class at Harvard Business School. Can you believe that? This one guy, the most attended class. And it is called Leadership and Happiness. That's the name of the class. Michelle, I'm going to have you read what he wrote here, because I have a hard time reading it, okay? But right here, he's talking about what, in his class, talking about what makes you happy. So read down through what he says.
He says, it is nothing that you learn here at Harvard. What you learn here is what will make you successful. If you confuse that with how to be happy, you are making a huge mistake. He says, according to research, we now know that happiness has everything to do with our love relationships.
Let's stop right there for a minute. This is Harvard Business School. He said, all the research has been done. We now know that happiness comes from one thing: love relationships. Friends, this isn't, I know we're in church and I'm reading this, but this wasn't done for church. This is done and taught at Harvard Business School. Go on to read what he says.
In these 4 areas, in your faith life, your family life, your real friendships, and work that serves others in person. Do you want me? He goes on to say he learned this the hard way. I had been working 80-hour weeks, and part of it was workaholism, success addiction.
He says a pathology of
fears of failure. He says this: the problem is that when you are a workaholic, people congratulate you.
Stop right there and just let it sink in. Did you hear what he said? The trouble with workaholism is you're congratulated for it. Wow, man, you work hard. Is that, when people think of you, Is that the first thing that comes to their mind? Man, he's a hard worker. He works harder than anybody. We congratulate workaholism. Go ahead, continue on.
Nobody says, man, you do good at drinking gin. Nobody ever says, dude,
We do to some people. I'm not going to mention that. Yeah.
dude, you're unbelievable at how much meth you can consume. People feel sorry for you when you are addicted to other substances or gambling or porn. But when you are a workaholic, people congratulate you.
Right. Right. So, I'm going to have Michelle, and I'm going to help her here, but when I was doing this, before I even did it, I was thinking about a mother's love. Now, fathers, we love our children too, but we express it maybe a little differently than mothers do. And I think it's good, right? I think that there needs to be a kind of a balance in there and so forth. When I think about a mother's love, I think of things that I kind of wrote down here. And I wanted Michelle to talk about it kind of maybe from her perspective, right? And that's not to say that a father can't be like this either. I'm not saying that. But to me, these kind of things epitomize a mother's love. That's why I love in the Bible how it doesn't just, when it refers to God, it doesn't refer to God with only male characteristics. It refers to God as like a mother hen, like with her wings spread, protecting her chicks, or things like that, right? So the second thing is this, talking about a love that lasts, right? And you can read the text there if you want, and then maybe talk about those things.
It's kind of what you just read. It says, love never fails. Where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. But these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love.
Yeah.
And then you have here, love outlasts a few things. And the first one is perfect lives. I think a lot of times as women, it's put on us maybe sometimes. I don't know. I think we deal with this a lot better today, but where we have to have this perfect life and our family has to be perfect and we have to have it all put together. I think sometimes it's people in leadership that are looked up to, even like, although we don't want that, some people might and say, oh, well, you guys should have it all together. Your kids should be perfect and all that. And that is not necessarily always the case.
Yeah. Like being a perfect parent.
Yeah.
Number one, I don't even know what that even means, like perfect parent. But I think we maybe have this idea when we're young, and so it's interesting to me now as Michelle and I see young couples now that have babies and kids, and they're doing things differently than like what we did, and because why? They're trying to be, this is the new thing or the new trend or whatever. And I think, you weren't raised that way and you turned out, you know what I'm saying? Like there's always like the next thing that's better or trying to be perfect or whatever. And really there's no such thing or there's no perfect kid.
Right.
And the great thing is that love is what lasts, not being a perfect parent. Mm-hmm. We make a lot of mistakes as parents, right? And children make a lot of mistakes as children growing up.
Yeah.
But the good news is that love outlasts that, right? You get to be older, and now we have, your dad, and you can look past, at things that maybe he did when you were young, and look past that because he wasn't perfect, right?
Yes.
But it's love that lasts.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think of the many times, and I don't know if Brock is here this morning, but
He is.
The times the boys have just driven me crazy because they didn't meet my expectations when I needed them there for me, when I wanted them to do something. And I think after all we've done for these boys, they're going to behave like this, they're going to do this, but really, and then I have to check myself and say, but no, Michelle, that's what love is. Love is regardless of how they treat me or how they respond to me. I want them to act better but I love them and I would do anything for those boys. I was thinking about a time a while ago when one of them asked to borrow some money and they said, Mom, I'll pay you back. Have you guys heard that before? I'll pay you back next week when I get paid. And it was also at a time when financially I didn't really know if Jeff and I could really do that or should. Is it it's going
It
to
was
hurt.
$10, and I wouldn't know if we had
No.
that. No.
It's going to maybe hurt us a little bit. And is it really benefiting them? They're asking to borrow money, but you know what? I did it because I love them, and it was for a specific thing, and I wanted to help them with that. Whether it will come back to bite me, I don't know. But
I know one time when we lived in Africa, Brock was young, and a friend was visiting, my friend Jeff Morris was visiting Africa, and he brought, it was around Christmas time, he brought a Santa Claus, a British Santa Claus outfit, nothing like anyways, they're skinny, wear a real long red robe, and so we kind of told him there's Santa Claus, woke him up, and then he found out that it was my friend Jeff, and Brock said to me, Dad, out of all the people in this world, you're the one that's never supposed to lie to me. I'm like, oh my God. You know what I mean? We're not perfect. We fail. But love outlasts that.
Yeah.
I think Brock still loves me even though I lied to him about Santa.
You also have written here about right answers. And,
Yeah.
a lot of times as parents, we do make mistakes. And I hope that my dad always had a hard time saying I'm sorry, or that he had made a mistake and messed up. He had a hard time saying that. And sometimes I'm stubborn too in that way. I don't say I'm sorry enough to Jeff that as I should, but even saying you're sorry to your kids and that you messed up, that you love them regardless. But yeah, to be able to admit that you've made a mistake as well. I think that's important.
Yeah,
Exactly.
having all the,
Yes.
Yeah. And the last one is great abilities, right? Great abilities. Not none of us are perfect, right? And so love, I love that idea that love covers a multitude of sins, right? Love. It's an amazing thing.
And just real quick, I want to say to our young people out here, especially if you have Christian parents, Don't
look at me.
And also to you moms who pray for your kids, I would just say don't give up. Continue to have hope, to continue to trust God to work in your kids' lives, because I just feel like that is so important for ourselves and for our kids to know that you are being prayed for, that you are loved, and even more than what your parents love you and how much they put up with you, God does, even more. Even like at us, as think of God as how He looks at me and how I look at my kids. But parents, I commend you on praying for your kids, standing in for them, lifting them up in prayer. Don't stop. That's very important, I feel like.
And then the last thing is this, the 1 Corinthians 14, Paul says this. So all that being said, everything that we've said, everything we've talked about the last couple weeks and everything, Paul kind of says this. He says, listen, follow the way of love. Follow the way of love. And this one I take that to mean is that needs to be the foundation of everything that you do. The foundation. You can't start anywhere else. So whether it's in a new relationship, you start it on the foundation of love. Decision making, start it with the foundation of love. No matter what you do, Paul says this, follow the way of love. And he says this, love never fails. It's never going to fade away. It's always, always, always going to be there. Any last words?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
It's hard. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
Every single time to have that love for people, especially maybe someone that you work with or a family member that's not maybe acting the right, I don't know, but it's hard to do, but I know it's the answer. I know it's like you said.
Yeah. And I think sometimes when it comes to things like this, when it comes to our problems we have or whatever, we tend to think like just because we follow Christ, it's going to be kind of just an automatic thing, right? Friends, it doesn't work like that. You know, some people, they come to Christianity because their lives are a wreck and a mess, and somebody with a good heart and means well says, you know, when you become a Christian, you know, all things are great. Well, they may experience that. No, it's still your life. It's still, you still have the consequences of all your bad decisions you made in your life. The good thing is that you have God with you. And Romans 8:28 says, he'll work all things together for your good. See, that's the promise. The promise isn't, I'll get you out of it, I'll take it away, everything's gonna be rosy. That's not the promise. The promise is, I can work all things together for your good. And that, friends, is the way of love. It's the way of love. Why don't you go ahead and close in prayer for us, huh?
God, thank you for this message about love. And God, I just pray that it would sink in today. I think of that song that Keenan Country sings, The Proof of Your Love. Let my life be the proof of your love, God. And everything that I say and everything that I do, whether it's with my kids, with a spouse, with someone we work with a family member, no matter what it may be, God, may love be the thing that matters the most, that comes into play, that we remember, that we think of God, and that we have that foundation in love, just like Jeff said. So God, I just pray for each one of us as we walk this Christian walk and learn what it means to be a Christ follower, God, that you loved us, and so help us now to show that love and to give that love to the world, God. We thank you for it. Thank you for the way you guide us, you lead us, God, and we just leave it all in your hands, and thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
If you're doing your fill in the blanks, number 3 is love is what works. Right.